In this video, I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about God, think about God in perspective. And that's just coming up from right now in this weird world we're in right now. There's a lot of trials, there's a lot of suffering we're going through, especially with sickness or social issues. We see a lot of things going on. And I hear a lot of why would God let this happen? And maybe a lot of these things really look really bad from our perspective. But I want to take a couple of minutes now to, to maybe try to shift. Let's shift away from our perspective of looking at things and look at how maybe God's looking at it. And there's actually a book in the Bible that's like this, and it's called Job. If you're not familiar with it, there's in it, it's a story. And in the gist of it is that the devil approaches God and basically calls out God and says, look, your people only love you and worship you because you give them everything they want. You bless them and they have everything they want. If you took that away from them, then they would betray you and leave you. And God said, well, take a look at my servant Job. So the devil and God, over some few steps, basically set a test, and God agrees to step away from Job and let the devil do what he wants, to the point where God says you can't kill him. You can do the other things you want to do, but you can't kill him. You can't take his life. And through the book, we see Job suffers a lot. He loses his fortune. He was a very rich man. He loses his family, and he has a lot of sickness and suffering. And he has a lot of friends, well, I'd say, quote, friends, that give him a lot of hard time, saying that he sinned and caused this. So as that goes on, though, Job prevails and God restores the things that he lost. And then God and Job have a discussion about what happened. But so let's look at a lot of ways people look at that. And I've heard people say that throughout this book that maybe, why would God let the devil do that to him? It's mean. Or they're looking from their perspective, maybe that God's being mean, allowing this to happen. Yeah, he lost his wife, he lost his family, he lost his fortune, he lost his health. And why would God do that? But let's take a second, though, instead of looking from our side, let's go back to God's side. Because a few years ago, this kind of struck me that when God was making, the devil and God was making this deal, God wasn't throwing Job into suffering. God was actually saying to the devil, look at Job. He will beat you without me. I will step away from Job and he will beat you. And when I realized that, that was a huge compliment to Job, right? God was saying to the devil, that human, that imperfect person will beat you without me. And part of me, although I wouldn't want to go through all that suffering, would really think that was awesome if God thought that about me. That God had enough belief in me and my strength and my love for him that I could beat the devil without God helping me. So think about it from that perspective. And even in the perspective of what happened to Job and all the stuff that he lost, right? He lost his family, he lost his fortune, and he lost his health. But let's change perspective for a minute and kind of a little story that I remember. I remember a long time ago being in the town that I'm from and seeing a little toddler be given an ice cream cone. And they saw in the look in their face when they got that ice cream cone, this was the greatest thing they ever had been given. They cherished this ice cream cone. And then they weren't paying attention and the ice cream cone warmed up and the ice cream fell off of the cone and slapped the ground. And when the toddler realized that, the thing that toddler cherished at that point in time was gone and destroyed. And the toddler had no idea how that was going to be fixed and started crying their eyes out. Their happiness was gone. What they cherished was gone. But then a couple of seconds later, an adult said, hey, don't worry about it. I can fix this and make it better. And gave the child a new ice cream cone. And why I'm saying that is if you look at the perspective of God and Job and all the things he lost, his family, his health, and his fortune could be easily replaced by God, like that adult replaced that child's ice cream cone. So from God's perspective, from our perspective, what Job went through looked really horrible and maybe even looked mean. But from God's perspective, he was showing that Job was awesome and could beat the devil. And everything Job lost, and even Job understood that God could replace it and make it better. And if you see in the story, God did. He blessed Job beyond what he lost for proving that he was what God said he was. So just take a few minutes to think about when we suffer in our trials, that not all of them, trials and suffering are bad, but a lot of times God has a point. God has a perspective for that. God is letting that happen for a reason, and it may be to prove who you are.